And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bubba the Bat Flip, episode 98. The 2021 fantasy baseball season has come to an end. 6 months in the books. Tons and tons of fun, tons and tons of stress. I don't have any more hair to pull out, so it didn't affect me. Toby's still looking good, though, at least I think underneath those hats. But you can find me on Twitter at BDNTrick, my co-host. I mentioned, as always, on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. Toby, how we doing, man?
We're doing well, Bubba. The end of the season was a solid one. You know, it didn't go like the best that it could, but it wasn't the worst, which I think is important. So yeah, and it's nice. It's nice to be in the off season. Although it's funny, like I was just counting down the days, honestly, until the season was over. Like I just was ready for it to be over. And then the moment it was over, I was like, I'm ready to draft. I was like, I want to like I'm in some, group chats and stuff like that where people are just like, some people are already drafting. So the bug is already there. And, we're exciting. But I'm going to cut down on leagues next year. When we talk about things that went wrong and things that got right, I am going to cut down on leagues next year.
Yeah. I already pulled out of 2 leagues this morning. I have a couple more I'm working on.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about that. I'm already making a conscious decision on certain things to I might add a few more somewhere else, but we'll talk about that as we get into it. But
interesting.
I'm with you as well. It's nice to be done. My wife has laughed because for the entire season, Sunday through Thursday nights, I had 2 DFS shows I did every night, and amongst everything else. So it's been entertaining. Like Sunday night, we got home from my nephew's 2nd birthday. We spent the weekend at their house, and she's like, "Do you have any podcasts tonight?" I said, "Nope." She's like, "What? What did you all? Do you have any articles? Right? Nope." And she's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's gonna be nice for a little while. It's gonna be nice." So here we are, baseball season in the books. It's nice, but playoff baseball's on. The Red Sox look like they're about to take down the Yankees, which is fun.
What's the score? I saw early on. It's 6-1.
Going to the bottom of the 8th.
Right Man, now. What a shame. Garrett Cole struggling, shortest start in
2 innings.
However many years. Imagine spending a 1st-round pick on him next year.
I know. I could not imagine it. Like, did you see my tweet I put out there?
Just never. No, I didn't.
Like Ray Murphy was the first one to favorite it, and I've had a few others. I said, "Oh man, Garrett Cole's price tag just keeps dropping after these starts." Then I use the excellent gift from Mr. Burns. It's like, yeah, you guys just let him go. That's fine.
Oh, totally. He's awful. He's awful.
No,
he should be in the 3rd or 4th round this year.
Yeah, easily. Yeah, at the best.
Just
like Luis Castillo.
Let him drop.
Just don't draft him at all.
Very similar pitchers.
Yes, very, very similar pitchers. Same profile, everything. So that'll be fun to watch. Like, that's always the good part, because the postseason has guys like that, or the opposite, Randy Arozarena last year, who ended up having a good year this year in the end. Like, if you look at his numbers, but man, the start of the season, there was a lot of early victory lap and like, you idiots, you shouldn't have taken him early, all this stuff. But that's the beauty of a 6-month season. Like, it's something we'll talk about a lot during the offseason reviews. It's hard to hang on, but it's one of those, if you have the willpower to go, okay, I trust the back of the baseball card theory, like these guys will get their numbers. Well, if you struggled through the tough parts, which is hard to keep struggling with, more often than not, they're going to get you what you need. So, and he proved that. And it's tough, but it works, and that's one thing that we'll talk about for sure. But let's just start with our season in review, Toby, and we'll go over some of what the leagues that we did good, bad, whatever you wanted to do. So recap how things went for you, because I will say this before I give you the floor. Last year you basically won everything. This year you might not have won everything, but I think this year was more impressive to me because watching you throughout the season, you were like you were not happy early on. Like, things were not going well early between the saves, everything else. You grinded your butt off to get to where you got. Like, you showed some moxie, kid. No, so it was very impressive to see. I know you'd rather have the big wins and all that. I think this was much more of an impressive season in my books, because a lot of people give up and go, screw it, I can't win this. But you cashed in a lot more leagues. I think people thought you were going to at one point this season. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, ever since, there's something about like that Vlad Jr. curse, that got me this year. But no, I appreciate that. It was a very different season, I think, than the last 2. I've been very fortunate, in a small sample, to be successful in the NFBC, in some mains as well. I mean, last year I went into the last day and I was hoping to hold on to 1 victory, and I ended up with 3. So it's just like one of those things. Exactly. And it's not going to happen. And for every time that happens, there's the opposite that's going to happen too, right? Where everything goes exactly like the opposite. And so especially when it rolls well for you, you're kind of like just waiting for that other shoe to drop. But it was a grind of a year. I mean, I started off super slow, as you mentioned. Saves were really, throughout the season, just really difficult. And I think what was really challenging is it made the game, chasing the saves, made it not fun. Because I was spending, it's not like I enjoy fab. Like, it's one of those things, you know, anybody who is in a lot of fab leagues, like you grind, and like, it's this bittersweet, like, you like the strategy of it. You like the finding the gems and the analysis and those different filters you use to try to find the guys that work. And when it works, it's great. When it doesn't, it's not. But when you're literally just looking for guys that get save opportunities, and that's where 99% of your focus is, it really makes it not very much fun. So it was a little bit doom and gloom. It was a tough start to the season, but I think I love full season roto for this reason. It's kind of like you mentioned, you know, like there's those early victory laps, you know, and like you think back to some of them and you're like, what were we thinking on these, either victory laps or thinking that guys sucked? I mean, we got a bunch of questions about Juan Soto and like how terrible he was. And I haven't looked at his final line. I'm sure maybe it's a little bit less than what we had hoped for, but the end of the season, you know, it's just like, how could you complain about what, like, it's just so many things went good. And so for me, for the season, it ended up being really good. And one of the lessons that it taught me just generally in terms of league selection is just, it's really helpful to diversify a little bit. You know, I was not very successful in my mains this year. I only cashed in 2 out of 4. I finished 3rd in both of those. Although one of them, like, I finished overall, I think it ended up actually being 41st. But I was in a league with 2 people, you know, shout out Greg Martin, and I think the other guy's name is Alan Mitchell. Alan Mitchell had 2 top 20 teams. I mean, and one of them was in mine, and Greg Martin was great too. He only had 1 team, but I think he finished top 15. I think one guy was like 8th and one guy was 15th. I mean, imagine finishing 15th in the overall and finishing 2nd. That kind of sucks, but at least you have the overall prize to like buoy you a little bit. Yeah. But I finished 41st overall in that league. So it was like an okay year. But then I had 2 high stakes leagues. In one of them, I was in the Diamond. I was sharing that with Brian Slack, which was a lot of fun to like share a league. I'd never done that before. And I learned a lot through that experience. And our team just never really got going. In the Super, you know, I had a pretty consistent team. I had Shane Bieber, so I lost my 1st round pick. My draft wasn't that great, but I got like Robbie Ray. I had Carlos Rodon. I was able to kind of put it together, and I finished 2nd in that one. And it's a high stakes league. So just finishing 2nd in that, combined with winning a couple online championships and a couple of DCs, ended up making it a positive ROI year for me, which was really big. And so, so it was nice. I grinded and I ended up finishing pretty high in every single important league that I was in, relatively speaking, which was pretty nice. But I would say, like, I don't know. Do you want to share how you did? And then we'll go to what went right, what wrong. Just so I don't talk for like 20 minutes in a row.
I do want to mention Juan Soto though, but he hit 313 with 29 homers, 9 stolen bases, 111 runs scored, 95 RBIs in 151 games. Like, I know that might be slightly down from what people wanted, but that seems pretty darn good to me. Like,
I bet it's pretty close to the projections.
Yeah, they don't have the. I guess I'd have to go find the full season projections.
Yeah.
Let me pull this up real quick. Where's Mr. Soto? Soto's streamer projections had him for 150 games, hitting 302 with 40 homers, so 11 homers shy, but 108 runs, 114 RBIs, and 11 stolen bases. So all in all, considering the slow start, pretty darn good. Like, he's like getting MVP consideration. So that tells you he got something right. And you got to imagine all the walks he was getting after all the trades. Like, he wasn't going full Barry Bonds, but he wasn't getting a lot of hit, and he was hitting everything. He had a 22% walk rate. 22% walk rate.
The walk to K rate was just nuts.
Yeah, I think it was 15% K, 22% walk. If you watch, like, playing DFS, I just kept telling people to plug him in every day. Don't care about the price, because he was getting double digits because he'd walk 2 or 3 times a day, score a couple runs. When he hit it, it was awesome. Like, he was just a monster getting on base. So I'll go right back to him next year. I'm not concerned about it. I know I think they'll have to do something. They have to add somebody. They can't go with the same lineup next year, but we'll see. That's a whole another discussion for another day. All right, so my season, in a nutshell, It fell apart over the last like couple weeks. It was going like September 1st, the season ended. I would have cashed like every single league. So I was very bummed at the end. But in the end, TGFBI was fun. You know, that was good. Finished third in our league. They're tied for third. We had 5 guys like tied, like all next to each other. Outside of, I believe it was Zach Rhoda who just crushed us all in that league. I got to give him proper credit here because
we should go through our leagues and give shout outs to the people who won.
Yeah, Zachary Waxman, he had 113 points, but then John Fenton, myself, Eric Mendelson, and Bloomfield, and Carlos Marcano, we all tied. So there's a 4-way tie for third. So it was pretty impressive in that regards. But then going down, Battle of the Pods finished second to Rob DiPietro, who just crushed us all in that league, just destroyed us. I believe you were 4th in that league. So we Bubba the Bat Flip.
I did finish 4th. So you beat me though.
Yeah, but
you beat me.
I'm just happy with that team because 2 things. My first 2 picks were
crushed me.
No, my first 2 teams were Eloy Jimenez and Luis Castillo. So that made me happy that survived. And the last like 3 weeks, every time I went to set a lineup, there was more and more red suitcases. So it was getting like stressful. I didn't have a first baseman for the last 3 weeks of the season. Every one of my first basemen were injured.
I gotta see. I remember being short on pitching in that league from the get-go, and it crushed me.
I did win my RotoWire online championship qualifier, so that made me happy because I was rolling with it all season. And then like the second week of September, I felt like 4th out of nowhere. But then the Sunday before the final week, I went into 1st, and I just pulled away the final week. Thank God. My satellite leagues, I was in second in one at September 1st, finished 7th. I'll explain why I think this happened when we get there. That one really anchored me a lot. And then in my other one, I finished 3rd in, and I was battling between 1st for most of that season. So that was a bummer as well. And then NFBC 50s, I finished 2nd in one of them, and then 6th and 10th in 2 others. So wasn't too great, but the best balls on Fantrax and the draft and holds on Fantrax, those went very well. So I'm happy. I won a couple of those, and that'll help really make things happen. But all in all, was a productive season. So I think, and Matty Wood, the NFBC 50, I finished 2nd, and Matty Wood won that one. And the satellite, I finished 3rd in. Greg Jewett finished 2nd. I forget the gentleman's name. I don't know who the gentleman is in 1st, so I can't give him proper love. But I can tell you his name. It was James Gable. So don't know who he is, but Greg Jewett, I'll give him a ton of credit because he was like 4th and 5th all year, and I was in 2nd battling for 1st. And the last month, he went all the way towards the top. I just started slowly falling, so he put a hell of a run in there. All right, so what else you got for the season review?
So just shout outs to people. So in the Diamond, Larry Schechter won that one. So kudos to him. In my super, Ned Donahue beat me by 2 points. But he was dominant in the end, and he finished 2nd, I think, in the main event overall last year. So just a really good player. And shout out to Dave McDonald, who had a nice little late run in that league.
Is that the one that he slept through the first 2 picks?
Yeah, that he was not available for the first 2 picks, and we stopped it for him. And then in my first main, so Alan Mitchell won. He was 13th overall. Greg Martin was 15th overall, lost by 0.5 point. Yeah, and I was 3rd at 41st overall. In my second main event, Dalton Del Don won. And again, I think we'd mentioned on the show before.
Yellow Brick Road, man. My God.
Dude, but shout out to him. I mean, he had an extreme strategy of hitting pitching hard and early. Like his first 5 picks were pitchers, something like that, I think, in one of my leagues. And kudos to him. It worked out. He was super consistent. I think this was his best league. I think he finished 42nd overall here, but just really consistent in all the leagues that I was with him in, which was at least 2 main events. So shout out to him there. In main event 3, Joe Anthony won. He had a fantastic season. He posted his season results. He won both of his main events. And he finished 16th overall. Yeah, so kudos to him. And then thorn in my side, Jeff Zimmerman and Fred Zinke won my other main event. Yeah, they finished 35th overall. Won our main event. Dalton Del Don was 2nd. So shout out to them. I've played up against Jeff twice in like NFBC so far, last year in our mini super and this year in the main event. And he's beaten me both times. And I think I finished like 3rd and 5th or something like that. So I promised Jeff to give you a better run, the next time we run up against each other. And then in TGFBI, I finished 2nd. 41st overall. So solid showing, but Jordan Rosenblum was just I never had a shot, honestly. Like halfway through the season, it was like, I'm not even trying to win this. I'm just trying to grind it out, finish as high as I could in the overall. And I was able to move up with stolen bases and saves towards the end of the season, but never got close to him. I think I lost by like 20 points.
Yeah, and if people want to go check it out, Jordan put out a really cool like chart of people that could have been picked up throughout the season and the return value they gave you. So you could see if you were like, I guess, quote unquote sharp, or if you got good value on your picks and how they helped you potentially win your leagues or lose your leagues. It's an interesting exercise. Like it's not the end all be all, but it's pretty cool to see who the big guys were. Like Adolis Garcia, obviously grabbed him early for cheap. He like crushed it. And even though he wasn't that great towards the end, what he did at the beginning, you couldn't match that.
It was like 30-15. I mean,
yeah, it was insane. So
lock it up.
It's great in those regards. So just it's a cool little exercise if you guys have time to check it out or want to check it out. But you talked about things you might do differently. You're kind of hinting at it. What we'll start on the positive side of things. What went right for you this year to I'm not
you where you are? I'm more of like a critical person. Things that went well. Sure. Sal Perez went well. I had a lot of Sal Perez. I think I had him in like 12 leagues or something like that. So that was super positive. Having Sal Perez, and even, I mean, JTR, he didn't have the season that we had dreamed of, but he still finished with 17 home runs, 13 stolen bases, 65 runs, I think, and 73 RBIs with a solid enough batting average. So, generally like investing in a high catcher. I mean, there was certainly catchers that you could have invested on later on too and got a return, but I think that worked pretty well for me. Another thing that worked well is I kind of tried this for the first time, but I really honed in on velocity increases in spring training. And I used a lot of my late round picks to target those guys. And as a result, I got a lot of Sean Manaea, who was up and down this season, but for pick, 250, his 3.7 ERA and 1.2 something whip and however many wins he got me was pretty phenomenal, as well as the Ks. So that really worked really well for me. I got Carlos Rodon for the same reason. Worked out super well for me. And then Robbie Ray worked out for me for the same reason in a number of places. And so that's definitely something that I'm going to be looking at moving forward, is really putting a lot of stock, at least in later round pitchers, in those velocity increases, because I really think that's kind of critical. So those things were good. My hitting generally was pretty good this year, I will say. I think there was only one league where I really struggled in hitting, but I could be lying. My DCs, I definitely did better later on. Mm-hmm. So drafting later on with like more of an idea of what the landscape is, I think I'm stronger in that, because I think I'm better at working in certainty than in some of this not certain stuff. So those were some of the positive things I think that I was able to do. I also did really well in stolen bases this year. Yeah. Generally speaking, a couple places where I wasn't, but I'm in a lot of leagues. Generally, I was pretty solid in my fab leagues in stolen bases.
Yeah, so, no, that's one thing I was going to mention as well. Is we both have that similar approach. We try to stay balanced. Like most of our picks have to give us something in steals more often than not. And that helped me a ton as well this year, because there's a lot of people that were scrounging for stolen bases and stuff. And knock on wood, I was doing just fine. Like really no major issues in steals all year. I was near probably top 4 in every league in stolen bases. It was never an issue at all. So that was nice not having to chase that, because chasing that throughout later in the season, it's a lot of dead stuff that comes with that. Like little power. So I'd rather go chase a power bat or something else than go chase a guy with steals. It's we've talked about it a lot, but that's part of the philosophy, and it worked out this year. So we'll see how that continues on. My attitude towards saves of getting at least one of the big dogs early, if not 2, helped me out a ton. That allowed me to kind of not focus on them as much towards the end. We'll get into that a little later too, but that helped a bunch there. And I could go in fab and get guys like Cal Quantrill and some other guys throughout the season that helped me out a ton, because my starting pitchers, like the Giolitos and the Castillos, they still finished okay, but they weren't the big picks you needed early on, not to mention injuries and everything else. So that helped me to be able to spend some fab on some starting pitchers instead of some closers. I guess the other thing, like similar to what you said, we kind of talked about it before the show, is drafting later in the season. Like do the early stuff, like the cheaper early stuff to get comfortable with things, and then go hammer later. Pretty much any draft I did after March 1st, I was rolling in at least until the end. Like things were good. I made some probably poor managerial decisions, which we'll talk about shortly, that could have affected those things. But the rosters were much stronger, much stronger to start the season. And then you don't have dead spots like stuff we draft in like the Battle of the Pods League. What we did that in, was it even in December, November, something crazy. I had at least 2 or 3 guys that didn't even make a roster that year. It was just like things that like Rick Porcello. Somehow Rick Porcello didn't.
Oh yeah, dude. Like, I had Porcello and Hamels on one team. Yeah. It was just like,
and if you would have talked to us last November, why wouldn't those guys sign somewhere? Like, why not? So it's just one of those things.
Why didn't he sign somewhere?
Yeah, where was Porcello? I'm trying to figure out, is he an anti-vax code? Like, didn't want to play with like any of the rules, or is there something structurally wrong with him that we just don't know about? Because a lot of teams could have used a cheap Rich Porcello
Padres
to eat innings. Yeah, instead of Jake Arrieta or Vinny V or something. Like come on.
You can't be as bad as Jake Arrieta. I mean, we all knew that. Like, holy crap, that's bad.
So that was surprising. So that's kind of where I'm at. Like the steals, the saves, stuff in those lines, they went very, very well. Got a few other things we got to work on. But what went wrong for you in 2021?
What went wrong? Everything. No, I'm just kidding. The saves piece was just awful. And that's something that I'm going to change moving forward because I'd never experienced that before. The complete inability to get saves. Like I tried really, really hard. I had guys on my, just everything was going wrong. And it's just the absolute worst. It's the worst thing I've gone through in fantasy baseball in the sense that and Tanner Bell, who congratulations to Tanner Bell for winning TGFBI, finishing first overall. Phenomenal job. Tanner's a great player, did well in his main event as well. Just fantastic player. Highly recommend his spreadsheet. I use it religiously for my drafting prep. So shout out there. And also shout out to Dylan White, who finished second. He finished 5 points off or something like that. And Dylan's a phenomenal player. And you'll remember, if you remember to the projections that Smada does, Dylan was number 1 heading into the season. And then to finish number 2. He's great. And he also finished second in our Dynasty League, took a team that was totally out of it. And in a year turned it into a really good team. So shout out to him. It's hard to finish second, but he's a phenomenal player and he'll be back there soon enough. But Tanner Bell was saying this in his interview with Justin on the TGFBI podcast, which I'd highly recommend. But just the perspective when you're chasing saves, where so much of your energy, not just your fab dollars, but your energy is spent on analyzing closer situations. And you have so many, I had lines. I had 3 or 4 lines every fab period of different closer speculations. And those are lines that you're getting probably because they're closer specs. And they're guys you can't drop for actual decent bats. And it's just a horrible experience. I never want to go through that again. And it's not like I will go through that again, but just not at the scale that I did. So I'm definitely going to be targeting one early-ish closer for sure. A for sure guy early on. And then we'll see how I kind of move from there. But that's one major thing I think I'm gonna have to address. I think another thing for me is just I do, and this is more a psychological thing. I do well with certainty. I'm the type of guy who, when I draft, I like to fill in all my slots first. I like to fill in all of those starting 14 slots before I think about anything else. And I think the thing is, I need to be more comfortable with just, we talk about it all the time, but just grinding out that middle infield spot, that corner infield spot.
There might be a better 6th outfielder than whatever middle infielder you're taking right now.
Exactly.
It's hard. I know exactly what you're saying because it's so tough to be okay, I can get Jorge Polanco now to play shortstop, or I can go and get Kyle Schwarber to be my 6th outfielder. Which one should I really get? Because I can go get someone else. And it's tough.
Totally. And it's it's a total psychological change that you need to go through because like, it's kind of this idea of like, maybe you're operating out of scarcity instead of operating out of abundance. You're like, I'm always like, there's such an urgency around each pick for me where I'm like, I need this guy, I need that guy, or I need this guy to fill this spot. And it's like, that's what dooms me with the closers. I'm like, I've taken early pitchers, so now I can't take a closer here because I have to go offense, and I just feel like I need to be a little bit more flexible, a little bit more fluid. And I think I need to get better at just kind of taking what the draft board gives me, and being willing to not overextend for certain guys. Like, don't overextend because you need Brian Anderson to be your corner infielder because you really, really like him. Sometimes it'll work out, sometimes it won't. I also think I want to go heavier starting pitching early, because even with the pocket aces, and I normally get too early on, the thing I always find myself dying over is during the season. I shouldn't say dying over, but like the thing that I find myself just like in excruciating pain is pitching, and I just need to create that more stable thing. And man, you can get such a leg up in Ks just by having a few guys who crush it.
Just stable guys.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. Cause like you're saying is you usually wait after the second starter, you go like 7-8 rounds before you go. So now the stability, like you're saying, just goes out the window, like just gone. And that's going to be part of something I talk about too. Cause what you're saying right now hits home hard. Like that made a big impact on my season. So it made me think a lot about that. Like, okay, maybe I should go get a really good third or maybe a good fourth. Like it's interesting.
And here's the thing. I think the ideal way that a season works out is at the end of the season, you're chasing saves.
Yeah, that's it.
You're up in Ks and wins. When you can do that, when you can do that, it feels so good because you're not caught in this streaming dynamic.
Yep.
There are closers that are available late. I mean, like I struggled in saves. Yeah, I struggled in saves, but I've just finished in the 40s in saves, right? Yeah. I didn't finish in the 60s and the 70s where I needed to be in that 80th percentile group because I was so bad early on, but I could catch up later on. So the thing is I want to really boost those wins and those Ks early on and be going down the stretch with those closers and those middle relievers. Cause damn, it feels so good to be able to do that.
Well, you mentioned that Phil Deso, like he talked about how he almost dropped Walker Buehler at the beginning of September because he didn't need him, because he needed saves. And it's because he did what you're talking about. He also got Robbie Ray and Carlos Rodon later, but he had the stability to make that work. I just had Rob DiPietro on last week, and he mentioned the same thing. Like the last 2 weeks, or a couple of different weeks, he had 7 closers out there because he had such good pitching early on that he didn't need to worry about the wins and the strikeouts. It was like he didn't really want to drop them per se to help his opponents out, but he definitely didn't need to start them. So it's like what you're saying. You can go and chase saves and load up for that kind of thing if you have the stability elsewhere. That's something I'm really thinking about as well.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, I had some leagues where I had 8 closers in there too, like down the stretch, where it's just like, and it feels really good, honestly. I mean, it feels really good to be able to be in a position to be able to do that. So I think thinking about my league and getting stolen bases early, because the worst feeling is like having Yanni Hernandez in 50% of your lineups down the stretch. You know what I'm saying?
So rough.
And that was like in particular leagues where I wasn't as good or I needed those saves, The teams that closed really strong were the teams that already had a really strong Ks, already had really strong wins, and where those relief pitchers could solidify the ratios and the saves at the same time. And while everybody else is chasing, and those ratios start to go south a little bit. So I think those were a couple pieces there. But I think just being a little bit more flexible. I mean, look at draft boards at the end of the season. Yep. God, it's so brutal. It's so brutal how bad we are at drafting. Mm-hmm. I'm particularly bad at drafting. I know it sounds weird because I'm fairly successful, but I am really bad at drafting. And so I'm really bad at drafting. Like I'm a guy who had like every starting pitcher imaginable in the first 2 rounds, except for Corbin Burns and Max Scherzer. You know, like that's me, guys. Don't listen to anything I have to say ever again. So I just think that those are like some real big macro changes that I have to work on. And we'll see, you know, it always like, you always think of that. And then you get close to the draft and you're in that draft room and you're like, I need that guy because I know he's going to be good. I need Justin Upton, you know, I need him. But, yeah, so those are some of the things. And I think I got a little complacent after last year. I think I didn't do, part of it's just like, you need a break from doing this stuff, you know? But, you know, I would get to the draft board and I'd see guys and I'd be analyzing them and I'd be like, oh man, I didn't realize he was that good, you know, or I didn't realize he had done like this poorly towards the end of last season. So just knowing more about every guy that's there and possible on the board, I think is critical. And sometimes I just look at a guy and I'm like, you know, I'm not interested just because I know what I think he does. But just being a little bit more in depth, investing a little bit more time in that process during the off season, and not relying, like I'm always going to rely on projections because they're much smarter than I am, but also doing that individual work. I think that's needed.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of great stuff out of that. The pitcher thing is one that is my biggest. I think when I mentioned those teams I was doing well in and I fell apart at the end, my biggest problem was chasing wins and strikeouts. That's because I was so I thought I was comfortable in ratios because I was doing very well in ratios, but some of those streamers blew me up so bad that there was no turning back. So then it got to the point, well, I'm screwed anyways. Let's just put all the 2-star guys out there and try to get wins and strikeouts. And then it just got worse, even though I didn't think it could get worse. Like it just kept like compiling and compiling and compiling. That's how I went from like 2nd to 7th. It was really rough to watch. And I was getting more, like I almost stopped looking at that page. I was so angry at it. So, it was one of those that I think either A, just be content with what you have and keep grinding it out that way, or B, get the earlier starting pitching like we talked about. Go and get a few more guys to go. Like wins, I'm not as worried about because you can't predict that. That's just the way it's going. The landscape's difficult. But the strikeouts and innings. That's one thing I learned from the Tout Wars that I did. The format was innings pitched, not wins, not quality starts, innings pitched. You learned a lot there because I know we're both Giolito guys. Gio was still very good in that league because even though they blew every single one of his starts, it felt like he got you innings pitched 6+ most times out. So that helped there. But I think finding those innings and those strikeouts, that's one big thing I want to look at this next year. And still, you can't always predict that. That's still tough, but you can get a much better gauge on that than you can on wins. So I'll definitely go in that direction. Flip side, the leagues that I somehow did okay in pitching, because most teams had really good on offense, pitching was the thing, the starting pitcher. The ones that had good on pitching, I had no power. No power at all. I had all the steals. I had good average. I had all other 4 stats. Fine. No power. And chasing home runs usually was not an issue in the past for me. Seemed to be an issue this year for some weird reason. I don't know why. It was just not as like, okay, go get DJ Peters, which is fun, but also a crusher at times. Like when he slumps hard.
Yeah.
So it was not easy. Like, do you ride Lewis Brinson until the wheels fall off? And then like Jesus Sanchez at the end was nice. That was a plus at the end, but sometimes it was a little too late type scenario. So that one, I guess I could focus more on at the back end of the drafts because there are guys we see in the draft rooms that the power, like the Schwarbers and stuff. There's always some of those guys, but starting pitching, the strikeouts, that's a big one for me. Big strikeouts. I'll continue to draft closers the way I've been drafting them. And the one thing I will say though, and you hinted at it, or you talked about, I don't know if you meant to talk about it the way you did. We talked every week about fab pickups. And early in the season, all the big money went to these speculative closers. But then as the season wears on and the budgets get smaller, there's a reason you got 40+ saves at the end for cheap. Because you waited while everyone else is out of money and you're getting – I remember the one week I was happy I got Ranger Suarez and whoever was closing at the time for Cincinnati for like before he got DFA'd. I got them both for like $6. And it was awesome because everyone was trying to break the bank on closers. One thing I will say, if I'm hurting for saves in the future, I don't see this landscape changing anytime soon. Don't break the bank early. Just wait because you will get your saves. Do not just go break your bank on like a potential Adolis Garcia or somebody else. Do not break it on the speculative closers early on. That'd be my one bit of advice from that whole thing that we've talked about all season because I don't see that changing at all in the near future. Because what I want to ask, I took some I take pictures on my phone now when I see tweets I like that I want to talk about.
Oh, wow.
So Ryan Roof from RotoWire, great closers, grid guy. They have to do their grid over there. Everybody should check it out. He sent out. He's been doing a lot of different tweets, kind of recapping the season. So I want to ask you: there were 7 closers that kept their job all year. 7 out of 30 baseball teams. 7. So no committees. 7 guys kept their job all year. Can you even name like 4 or 5 of them?
The guys that kept their job all year.
7 closers had their job all year.
Reilly Iglesias.
That's 1.
Liam Hendricks.
2.
Ryan Presley.
3.
Will Smith.
4. That was the one I would have got.
Yeah, I couldn't. Yeah.
You're going to kill yourself when I tell you one of these, or beat yourself up over one of these. Because you might have thought he lost his job, but he didn't because he was on the IL.
Jake McGee?
No, Josh Hader, but he was on the COVID
Hader.
He was on the COVID IL, so it felt like he lost it, but he didn't. And then I'll give you Edwin Diaz, kept it all year somehow, and Mark Melanson. Who, I think he led baseball in saves.
I was all over Mark Melanson last year. Not this year.
So those are the only 7 guys in all of baseball that kept their jobs. So that just let that sink in. Like, we'll talk closers later on, and you'll hear him in a lot of shows.
What about Kenley, though?
He lost it at times. I don't know what the definition of lost it was. He said 2 more didn't really lose their role, but ceded 10 or more saves to others. 1 was Kenley Jansen. 1 was Aroldis Chapman.
Well, Aroldis was injured.
So Kenley, but still someone on the Dodgers must have been Trinan got at least 10 saves.
No. Trinan got 2 or 3.
So
Knebel got 2 or 3.
So someone on the Dodgers.
Joe Kelly got 2 or 3.
Oh, maybe it's combined 10 or more saves.
Yeah, I think it's got to be combined because
10 or more saves to others.
I don't think Kenley ever lost his job though.
No,
trust me, I was waiting for Kenley.
Oh, I had Kenley, and I was nervous. There's another thing. Stick to the back of the baseball card. Everyone was calling for his job like halfway through the season.
He was really good this year.
And I had him rostered. Man, at least September alone, if not the last couple of months, filthy, just disgusting. The Kenley of old. He was striking guys out, shutting dudes down. Like, some guys just, I don't know. It's weird, but I just wanted to bring that up. I thought it was interesting that only 7 people kept their jobs this year.
You're telling me I shouldn't invest in closers. Darn.
Well, that's why it's tough. That's why I'm trying to say, like, the landscape I don't see is changing either. It's not changing anytime soon. I think if you go and get one of the big guys, you're going to be good because, like, Hendricks was on that list. Iglesias, you could still count Kenley. Chapman still got a bunch of saves. Like, even like the big guys, they're getting a boatload of saves still. And if you mix and match them, I think it works out. It's going to be an interesting and trying to break it all down this year. But so you kind of already mentioned you're going to go starting pitching a little more bulky early, potentially. Maybe not early, but bulky early on. Same with relief pitchers. You're going to try to attack that a little earlier. So that's a couple things. Anything else? Any other positions or statistical categories you're going to try to attack? Like I mentioned, I need to focus on strikeouts. And preferably innings pitched wins type situations. I need to focus on home runs, but that's not as urgent to me as strikeouts. What are you, anything offensively you're trying to like stay focused on?
No, I'm really interested to see how, like, because home runs were definitely down. And batting average was definitely down. I'm very interested to see how this kind of new dynamic of lower home run totals and lower batting average, how that impacts the standings gains points, and like dollar valuations for this next year. I'm very interested to see that because Adolis Garcia is a really great example where you may look at him and you're like, what do you end up hitting, like 240 or something like that?
Yeah.
You're like, man, that's a total bummer. He hit 240, but he did have those 30 home runs and those 15 stolen bases. Well, 240 is league average now, Yep. So it doesn't have the same negative impact.
31 homers and 16 stolen bases. Whew.
Totally.
Outstanding.
And then alternatively, those batting average guys, man, it felt like all you needed was one batting average anchor to really have your team trending in the right direction. And so, so it'll be really interesting, I think, to think through like what the ramifications, all of those things are. But I think it just, plate appearances is so much of this game.
Yeah.
And having guys in there, not taking zeros, knowing what the platoons are and who's going to be in a given week. Home runs and stolen bases are where it's at, and batting average, obviously, but like that's where the value lies. You can really grind out a lot of the runs and RBI just by paying attention and trying to maximize plate appearances on your team, I think. So that's one thing. Those are some of the things.
No, you mentioned that's one thing I rarely ever pay attention to. I do, but I don't think I do it like the way I need to. Like it's in the back of my head stuff, but I need to pay attention to platoons more. Like, and more teams are doing it now. So eventually that's going to be one of those things where you just kind of, oh, well, this guy's got the strong side of it. So let's roll. But it is the just the plate appearances. It's crazy how guys like Zimmerman and Phil and, you mentioned Dave McDonald and everything. They're so focused on that sometimes more than the other thing. And you just keep accumulating stats. It's pretty simple in the end when you think about it. But that when on paper, it's like, oh, I'd rather have this guy, blah, blah, blah. But it makes sense. So maybe it's more of a tiebreaker thing going through drafts that I have to make a more concerted effort to take a look at as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the at-bat leaders, like, all the team, most of the teams finished in the top 100. Steve Weimer leads it. Great player, Steve. Jeff Zimmerman's second. Phil Dussault is fourth. And
did he do anything good this year?
Yeah, I know, right? Phil's so good. I mean, I've already congratulated him in like everywhere. So
yeah,
but kudos to Phil. Yeah, it's just like the plate appearances, the at-bats are so crazy. What's funny to me is that there's literally in the top. Okay, here's the first one. So right here. So maybe like among the top 40 teams, there was only 2 teams among the top 40 teams in terms of at-bats who had the most at-bats this year. There's only 2 teams that were 200 or above in the overall. And they were both my teams.
Nice.
So nice. I just messed up on the runs to plate appearances and RBIs to plate appearances or something.
Yeah. Always trying to learn and get better. It's the best we can do. And there's always something that slips by and you look back. And I guess I am going to look back like on my actual teams because I know I got a couple where the home run struggled a ton. It's like, well, Christian Walker, I took late hoping for home runs. He did absolutely nothing. That's like 25 to 30 home runs you're planning for to just disappear. That puts you in a massive hole out the gate. And so it's like I can't. Like certain teams I looked at, I'm like, I shouldn't beat myself up a ton. It was literally like 1 or 2 players that ruined it all. It wasn't like a cumulative thing. It was like 1 or 2 dudes that you specifically drafted for that thing, and they just no-showed. And I don't think you can count on that every year. I don't think you're going to hit the that bad every year type thing. So was the process that far off? Maybe not, but there's still definitely worth looking at. But I remember he was a big guy. He took late in a lot of drafts, like as a corner infielder for power alone, and that did not pan out at all. So we'll see where that goes forward. But let's talk about the good things again. We'll talk about some 2021 fantasy awards. So we'll start with the offensive MVP. Toby, who is your offensive MVP? And wait, it's not Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
It's not. I mean, the way that I think about this is just comparing ADP to what they were able to produce. And for that, I mean, I think there's an easy shout for Cedric Mullins to get that for sure. And yeah, he should probably get that actually, now that I'm thinking about it. But the guy I wrote down was Marcus Simeon. 45 home runs, 15 stolen bases, 115 runs, 102 RBI with a 265 batting average. So a plus batting average, in today's landscape. He's just phenomenal. He's had 700 or more plate appearances in 3 of the last 4 years. Talk about a guy who just kind of grinds it out. And, I was fortunate to have him on a few teams. And one of the things we talked about leading into the season about why we felt like he might be a benefit is because he had so many more home runs on the road than at home in Oakland. And then, so moving to a stadium where that was even average was such a huge step up for him. And I remember us talking about how the Reds would have been like an ideal landing spot for him, right? I think we were talking about that. But I'm really interested to see what happens with him. Obviously, the Blue Jays will want to resign him. At the same time, they're not going to want to give a 31-year-old shortstop or second baseman, I guess now, a huge contract, like probably more than 2 or 3 years. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with him and where he goes this offseason. because he's great fit in that lineup. But we'll see what they end up doing.
Yeah, no, I love Simeon. I have him down in the next segment of offensive players, but I agree. I should have went with someone with ADP, but I went with Trey Turner just to bring home the fact that he is probably the best player you can draft in baseball. For the fact that he played 148 games, didn't play a full season because of COVID, but 28 homers, 32 steals, 107 runs scored, 328 average. He's going to be hitting at the top of the Dodgers order next year. He's just so good, and it's like there's certain people that are all in on Trey Turner and certain people that still don't believe he can do it, and we've been pounding that drum for a few years now that he is this good, and now people are actually going to pay up and pay the price for him, which really stinks for people that believed in him and would hope he'd fall. But he brings all 5 categories to your team. Like we talk about getting steals early, and Whit Merrifield's awesome, but the power's kind of hit and miss. And Starling Marte was awesome, but the power was almost non-existent. So those guys are great, but Trey Turner gives you everything. Like J-Ram's awesome, but he'll get you 30 to 40 homers and like 20 to 25 steals. So he's like just below Trey Turner kind of.
And the batting average isn't as good.
Yeah, batting average isn't as good. So Trey Turner just does so much. You just talked about earlier how the new norm in batting average is like 240. He had 328. He had 335 last year, 298 the year before. Just that alone is going to be huge if the landscape stays the same, which it probably will. The home run, the Dodgers, legit. Yeah, leading off for the Dodgers or hitting second behind Mookie Betts. Either way, like my goodness, what he's going to do in that lineup. So I know it might have been a layup to use him as the MVP, but what he does to your fantasy team, it allows you so much leeway that, to me, he's the MVP, and it's going to be hard to pass on him at 1-1 next year. I'll be very honest with that. He's very, very high up on the list. Who is your Cy Young?
My Cy Young. Well, I saw who you put, and I think that's a really good shout. I'm going to go with Carlos Rodon, though, because I think Rodon, he went a little bit later than Ray. He went around pick 300, 320, something like that. And he did not. So let me just pull it up. So I think one thing about Rodon was just like, he was so good. Like 237 ERA. He only threw 132 innings, but 237 ERA, a .96 whip is just so beautiful. Like an under 1 whip from a starting pitcher that's giving you that level of ERA and then 34.5% strikeout rate, like 12.5 Ks per 9, a 28% K- walk. Like he was so good. And then even though he was like off and on down the stretch, I mean, like in terms of being available, like he brought it home. I mean, let's see. He had his last 6 starts, 5 innings, 11 Ks, 0 earned runs. 5 innings, 3 Ks, 2 earned runs. 5 innings, 5 Ks, 1 earned run. 5 innings, 7 Ks, 1 earned run. He had the bad outing where he got taken out, but still 3 innings pitched, 6 Ks, 2 earned runs. And then the last week of the season, 5 innings pitched, 4 Ks, 0 earned runs. Like he was just so consistent and so good all year long. I went with him, and he also had 13 wins, which was huge. I mean, that now is like, we talked about Giolito. He only had 11. He pitched 50 more innings, So I went with Carlos Rodon for those reasons.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great call. I went with Robbie Ray. It's pretty simple. He was probably the Cy Young winner in the AL. So he should be my fantasy Cy Young as well. 193 innings pitched. And you look back at his previous years in the last full season, 2019, 174 innings. He's done this before. The strikeout rate was a 32% K rate, and 18 he had 31.5, 31.4, 19 31.5. The biggest thing we say every year with Robbie Ray is don't walk, guys. He cut the walks, and magically everything else just fell into place beautifully. The batting average against was much lower, and everything else fell into line. But I think a lot of that is because he's not walking guys. He's not having to force his way into pitching into hitters' counts and try not to let them score. All these things that comes with letting free passes on base. It was a beautiful thing watching him just shove, absolutely be just dirty out there. 13 wins as well. A 32-game start. He had 33 starts in 2019. He had 32 starts in 2016. He's at 28 more in 4 of his last 5 full seasons now. I guess is another guy. If you're just looking at innings, he's got to be near that list. Now, is there concerns maybe 193 after a small season? There's a lot of that could take place next year, but to me, he's absolutely amazing. The J Stadium has a humidor now, so we saw the home run rates drop rapidly in the last couple of months in Toronto. So that's another one to keep an eye on as well, and that could just benefit him even more, which might make guys like Hyun-Jin Ryu all of a sudden a little more intriguing after the rough year he had. But that's another podcast for another day. But yeah, Robbie Ray is my guy. I did put in parentheses just because I wanted to mention one thing that was interesting. I gave an honorable mention to Julio Erias just for the fact he threw 185 innings, which is terrifying because he has never come close to that before. But he had 20 wins. 20 wins. I couldn't have predicted either one of those happening. I did not. I thought maybe 130 innings. So the innings plus the wins, that deserves an honorable mention to me just because I'm terrified of what they're going to do with him next year. I don't know what that's an injury-prone arm from the past that just took all those innings. So I'm very concerned. But all right, who are one of your 3 fantasy surprises?
Well, this will come as no surprise to anybody, but my first one is Vlad Jr. He was obviously a huge surprise to me. I mean, I think according to Razzball, he finished as the #1 player.
Yep.
So I'm gonna eat that loss. I've been eating it all year long. That's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed the tour of shame. But I mean, kudos to Vlad. He made the changes that everybody wanted him to make. So we know the stat line was just incredible. He stayed healthy. He got 700 plate appearances. He dropped the ground ball rate by 10% from 54.6% to 44.8%. He dropped it about 4% from his usual. The home run per fly ball skyrocketed up to 26.5%. He dropped he kept the K rate about the same, but still elite level K rate, which is fantastic. And I think the biggest change was his exit velocity on line drives and fly balls. That had been one of my biggest criticisms for him for forever. And he was really able to turn that around. So he had 75 barrels this past year, which is fantastic. Barrel rate was up to 15.1%, so almost double what it had been previously in his career. Actually, yeah, about double what it had been previously in his career. So just a huge kudos to folks who believed in him and believe that that growth is not linear and that he could make that jump. You certainly benefited a lot from that. And you know, and I didn't at all. So yeah.
Hey, it happens. I think that's one of those that the logic, I've said it amazing. The logic made sense. The results were bananas. So, and we all said it too. He's eventually going to figure it out, and he just figured it out. So it was. It's going to be interesting. I won't be having probably any Vlad next year because that price is already a first-round price, and that's empty stolen bases. So you guys know the rules with me. That's just not going to happen. But my first one's Marcus Simeon. You hit on it earlier. I echo everything you said. The guy is amazing. Really looking forward to where he goes. Another reason that we liked him a lot at his draft price is he was going to get second base eligibility, which is huge. So you got a second base shortstop kind of guy out there that just crushes, and he's proved it now in a few years in a row. So yeah, I'm 100% on board with you on that one. Who's your second fantasy surprise?
I'm going to go with Tyler O'Neill. I mean,
like
I think we all knew he could do it, but he also closed like crazy, right? I mean, he just went off in the last few weeks, won a bunch of people championships. You know, I think the key is the batting average. I mean, he hit 286 with a 31.3% strikeout rate, which is just ridiculous. I mean, he did have a 366 BABIP, but career it's 338. So he may have gotten a little bit fortunate, you know, but there's a lot of good, decent stuff there. I mean, the contact rate is low, so it's not necessarily ideally what you want it to be, but when you can provide that level of power and speed and you're getting in the lineup every single day, he didn't even get to 600 plate appearances for those 34 home runs and those 15 stolen bases. So again, huge shout out to him. I only had him on a couple of DCs, but phenomenal return for O'Neill.
Yeah, I love the O'Neill call. He was crushing towards the end. Really his price tag doesn't go through the roof, which stinks. But the dude's awesome, power, speed, and now average. So really, really fun one there. My second one, Cedric Mullins. The dude was amazing. 30-30, hit 291, scored 91 runs for the Orioles. Leading off, played 159 games, 675 plate appearances. The dude was awesome this year. Like, I'm expecting some regression, but at the same time, I still think he can get 25-25 possibly. Or the steals are legit. We've seen the steals in the minors. The power is the one that I'm still somewhat skeptical on continuing this path, but I still think he's 20 to 25 home run guy. The max EV was actually the lowest it's been in 2 years, so that'll tell you he's not by much, but he's been hitting it hard most of the time, but now he's barreling balls up. In the past, 0% barrel, 2.8, 8.1% barrel rate this year. So maybe he just figured something out. He worked on some things in the short season, and here we are. So it could be a transformation for Ced Mullins. Regular playing time in the bigs. He's only 27. There's a lot of growth to still be had with Ced Mullins. So could he go 30-30? Probably. It's a pretty special club, though. So I'm thinking more like the steal's legit. Maybe a regression in the power. Could be totally wrong. But I think he had a heck of a year and deserves a little bit of props, like you said. So Ced Mullins is my number 2. Who is your final surprise?
Great call. And I would have had him on there too. But I just saw that you'd already put him on here. Phenomenal player. You want to know what it kind of brings up a random thing for me is I wonder if Ozzy Albies just became a right-handed hitter only, whether I know it's obviously different from the righty versus lefty perspective, but check out Ozzy Albies splits.
Oh, he mashes left-handed pitching, mashes them, like destroys them. Oh, trust me, this is what DFS will do to you. He destroys lefties.
He does. He's got a 146 in his career. He's a 339 average, 146 WRC plus player. Ozzy Albies is, he's only got 617 plate appearances, but in a full season, right? And then versus righties, he's a 94 WRC plus, 250 hitter, 442 slug versus 577, 370 versus 310. Like, I wonder if he just gave it a shot, if that could help out Albies at all, because
Ced Mullins did it. Maybe that was it. Maybe that was the trick.
Albies had a phenomenal season. He was a 30-20 guy this year.
He was awesome.
Which is nuts. Yeah. But anyways. So my next guy was Austin Reilly. Not gonna lie. I looked and I was like, wait a second, Austin Reilly's hitting 300.
Yep.
Like, end of the season. Had no idea how well he was doing because he's not. I got him on 1 DC, right? And he's in the lineup. You don't even worry about moving him in and out. I was like, holy crap. Austin Reilly had a phenomenal year. I mean, 33 homers, 303 batting average, 107 RBIs, 91 run. Like, what? Well, I just totally missed this season. This totally flew under my radar completely. And kudos to everybody who got him. Man, that was just a surprise, as in, like, I had no idea he was doing that well. It just totally caught me by surprise.
Yeah, he was awesome. And he's hitting cleanup and just mashing all over the ballpark. So, yeah, and the biggest thing is the strikeout rate dropped a ton. Like 25.4% people might scoff at, but for him, that's really good. And for the standard of a lot of power hitters in baseball, that's really good now. That's one thing I've been talking to some guys about, and I think between the averages dropping and strikeout rates climbing, we have to change our expectations. Like some guys, the old days of, striking out 100 plus times and being embarrassing doesn't exist. Guys are cool striking out because it's the old Jose Bautista thing. Let's do it as hard as I can. I don't care if I hit it or not, but if I do hit it, it's going a long, long ways. And that's what a lot of these guys are doing now. That's why Javi Baez had such a monster year. The average was wishy-washy. Strikeout rate was still high, but he mashed in power, stole a ton of bases. That's the new standard, potentially. Potentially. We'll see. But I think we might have to kind of re-gear our mindset on like just staring at strikeout rate and batting average as much as we used to. It's still scary. Swing and miss can be terrifying because obviously if you're swinging and missing a ton, less going and play, less things can happen. But this could be the way, as the Mandalorian would say. So something to keep in mind as we keep going through this offseason. My final guy, and this is kind of a shout out to just an old guy that kind of a guy I was wrong on, and I'm scared to try him again next year just because he's getting older and like eventually the wheels have to come off the bus. But Charlie Morton was absolutely amazing. 185 innings pitched, 14 wins for the Braves. That's after 194, 167 innings the last two long seasons for Tampa Bay and Houston. He had a 28.6% K rate, which he had a 30.4 and a 28.9 in 18 and 19. He basically replicated those seasons. He was absolutely amazing. He was the ace for the Braves most of the season because most guys were getting hurt or this. Like Fried finished the season. He was a September pitcher of the month. Like he was awesome. But Morton was absolutely amazing. A guy that I was scared this past season what his workload would be. I'm already scared for next season, but he got the extension, so he's with the Braves. He was amazing. Absolutely amazing. I think I probably shouldn't be scared of him because he's done it now 3 full seasons in a row, and it might just be who he is. But he's 37, and eventually that train comes to an end. But I think I want to give him a shout-out because he was one of those guys that you could have taken a late flyer. Like I have the March main event ADPs up right here. Charlie Morton, he actually was moving up. He went pick 85. I was kind of surprised by that. He was pick 85 ADP in the month of March, which was much higher than I would have assumed. But he was awesome. He was worth that ADP. Let's put it that way. Worth it. So wanted to mention him. All right.
Definitely. He was so good down the stretch.
Yeah, he was amazing. Like I never would have predicted that in a million years. Let's get a few listener questions and we'll head on out of here for our first post-season podcast. Andrew Matney asks, will the Mets ever stop kicking me in the balls? I'll hang up and listen.
Andrew and I share a main event team. I thought me buying a Mets hat mid-season would really propel them to victory and change their fortunes, but it did not. It didn't work out. In fact, they were really bad after I bought the Mets hat. Yeah, so sorry.
Jacob W. Wincoop asks, do you think Cedric Mullins was a fluke or will he duplicate what he did this season? I kind of said I don't think it's a fluke. I'm kind of hesitant on the power, but he might have made adjustments, maybe not switch hitting as you mentioned. These things, I let's just say I believe there's more to him redoing it than not doing it. That'd be what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he looks really solid. I mean, the exact numbers. So let's just take a look. So the walk rate was solid. O-swing solid. Slightly better than league average. Slightly better than league average. K rate is low, which really helps keep that batting average up. The contact rates are all obviously really good. The BABIP was 322. His career is 304, but it doesn't seem strange necessarily, especially a fast guy like him who's hitting from the left side more or completely now instead of the right side, that might benefit him. This is also way more plate appearances than he's ever had from a season. So that looks relatively reasonable. Maybe a little bit of a give in that batting average, but I wouldn't expect it too much. And then when you look at his numbers, so he had 39 barrels and he had 30 home runs. Typically it's around 60% of barrels. So what I would say is, I would project him maybe next year, although he does play in Camden, but I'd project him maybe for 20 to 25 next year, something like that. I imagine the projections will have him around there. And then he stole 30 out of 38, which seems relatively reasonable. So I don't see why he can't get close to doing what he did before. Maybe a little bit. I wouldn't expect the same power, but the 25 or the 20-20 even is with that batting average is fantastic. And who knows, maybe they'll get slightly better next year offensively. And he'll help score a few some more runs.
Mancini, they're still gonna be there.
It's true.
Unless they get traded, which that wouldn't surprise me, but they should still be there. That's a pretty potent least top of the order.
Yeah.
And
there you go.
You mentioned Camden.
Cedric Mullins, grab him.
Yep, everyone wants him, so you have to get him early. Lil Book of Calm, he mentions first, thanks for a good season because he finished first and second. But thank you for listening. You've been awesome. He said per Fangraph end of year auction value, only 9 of the top 20 starting pitchers were drafted in the top 45 in NFBC. Top 45 starting pitchers in NFBC. Is this an outlier season or early starting pitcher often this risky?
It's an outlier season.
Yeah,
for sure.
A lot of injuries.
Why that is, there's injuries. The guys normally at the top are the guys that produce a ton of volume. And we didn't necessarily see that, right? Even some of the guys we've talked about, like Ray had 193 innings. Rodon had 132. If you look at the leaders, it was just there's 3 or 4 guys that hit 200. So I think it's an outlier season. I think it has to do with the injuries and just coming off of the shortened season and how much that messes with guys. I think that the challenging thing will be determining, and I think you need to go case by case, is determining what was that and what was actual kind of skill changes or changes in volume that we're going to see heading into next year as well. Because in a typical season, it's like the guys that will fall the most, your Aaron Nolas, for instance, right? Where it's almost unexplainable how bad he was, especially given like some of the underlying skills. Like normally you'd want to prioritize those guys next year, even though recency bias has us not want to do that because, like they should be the same guys and there'll be values. But it'll be really interesting to see like with each guy, like how that happens. I also think there's just a lot of really good young starting pitchers who kind of took that next step, or not even young guys, but guys who maybe showed really great skills. Your Gaussmans, your Alcantara's, your Burnses, although he was going high as well. But like those guys, Freddie Peralta's, those guys who kind of showed really good skills in 2020 and were able to translate those into 2021 as well. So it's going to be tough. It's going to be a really difficult pitching landscape next year that we'll have to figure out.
Yeah, because one of the really tough ones is, we were like, well, what's the workload going to be like after the 60-game season? Well, now it's like, what's the workload going to be like after a full season, after a 60-game season? Like, are they still like? Yeah. It's just, it's going to be a freaking mess.
It's going to be a few seasons before we're out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully, knock on wood, we have a full season next year. So let's keep that one going too. That'll make it even more entertaining. But Wake Up 1 through 9. I'm just gonna say that he's a parody account. Basically, he's a very smart fantasy player, but he's very funny, very, very funny. And he says, "Is average launch angle something you will be reviewing over the offseason?"
I'd never look at average launch.
It's angle. A backhanded Vlad Guerrero comment.
I know, but I never look at average, whatever it's called. I never look at launch angle. I always look at ground ball rate.
So goofy.
Ryan, yes, I was wrong on Vlad.
Ryan Roof asks, any closers that emerge late that you think you'll be targeting next year, like Doval, Bednar, Rainey, Chafin, Stratton? I'll be targeting Doval. I know that for a fact because I think they found someone there. I was telling guys in September that I thought he'd be our closer next year, not this year. Well, he's already closing this year. So barring something crazy, I like the kid. The kid is filthy, absolutely filthy. There's a lot that's going to take place. Like, these are all good names, but they're all on teams where you're playing roulette already. So it's tough.
It is really tough. Chafin sucks. So definitely not Chafin. He's awful.
When did Scott Jenstead join the show?
He is. He was terrible when I picked him up. Terrible when he got saves for me. Terrible when he blew saves for me. Gosh, that guy's whip and his ERA were probably so out of whack on the A's. Like, he would just give up so much. Doval is interesting. I mean, remember, Jake McGee's injured, though. They have him next year as well. And Doval, the financial incentives are not to give young guys those save opportunities.
I don't think Farhan cares about the financial incentives.
Okay.
We'll see.
Well, we shall see.
The only thing, if anything, he'll split with McGee. He'll take the Rogers role. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Because McGee's just strictly a fastball guy, and that caught up to him. That caught up to him in a big way.
Yeah. Bednar's really good. Mm-hmm. Really good. His curveball down the stretch was disgusting. Like, you would watch him and he kept it low in the zone. It was beautiful to watch. At the same time, they're having him rotate with Chris Stratton, who was also looked fantastic down the stretch as well, and who's also an older player. I don't know if he's a free agent or not. So it's just really hard to say, honestly, with some of these guys. I think Clase, I think Clase was great. And I think he's a guy who he should have the job next year. I can't see Cleveland spending big bucks to bring in a more expensive closer, and they were willing to give him the role from the get-go last year. So I don't know why they wouldn't go back to him next year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to digging in on the bullpens and looking at Ryan and Greg and all these guys, Michael Carter, and so many of these really good bullpen guys. Have to say, because there's so many question marks in the bullpen. Like I said, it's going to be like the same or worse next year. This is not going to get any better anytime soon, because a lot of the teams that were constantly churning guys out, well, it's because they want to spend money to begin with, so they're going to keep doing the same thing. And then other teams are realizing, like the Giants and the Rays and stuff, is I'm playing situations, and I got multiple guys that can get the job done, and we're going to roll. So it's gonna be interesting. That's just to say the least. It'll be fun to break down and make us probably get very angry to start next year as well. So, but that'll wrap it up, Toby. No more questions for this evening. We have wrapped up our review show for 2021. Any final thoughts as we are soon going to be looking into 2022?
No, thanks to everybody for listening throughout. Really appreciate it. Thanks for those of you who shared kind of results, and appreciate the kind words of everybody on the podcast. It's been a fantastic season again with you, Bubba. I'm rocking it out. So looking forward to the off season. You know, we'll see. We'll definitely be here for most of the off season. May take a little bit of a breather, but appreciate everybody and their support of the show, following us. The questions throughout the year are always great. You guys always ask fantastic questions. So really appreciate that. And congrats everybody on finishing this season, and let's get ready for 2022.
Yep, it's coming right around the corner. So we'll be with you guys off and on throughout the off season. Lots of content coming your way, though. So check it all out. Check out Toby on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. I'm at BDentric. Thanks for listening all season, guys, and congratulations to those that were victorious. We'll catch you guys later.